Okay. Good morning. This is John Wharf with MCNC as well. We've got several folks here at MCNC that are joining us live as well. We've got several school districts around the state that are joining us for the Google Apps and Chrome management updates. This is the first in a series of webinars that we'll be providing to you for Google Apps training as well as several other things. If you would, please sign in on the sign-in sheet. This is so that we can communicate with the school districts and get feedback from you for our evaluation. This information will not be shared with anyone else. This is just for MCNC to provide evaluations as well for DPI to provide CEU credit if you may need it. So CEU credit is available if you are a certified personnel or if you need it for other things such as the NCET PTSP program or other programs along those lines. Feel free to take advantage of that. Contact information is on the board. For the webinar, we are going to be asking you if you have questions to post those in the webinar, and we have someone that is reviewing those and taking a look at those throughout the webinar. So please remember to sign in, and we'll put this back up on the board again. So are you using Google Apps? So far in the state of North Carolina, we have a lot of folks that are using Google Apps for education. As well, you've seen many changes that have come out with that. Now, you may be using it for only email, or you may be using it for the email and apps, or just for apps. Now, we've also seen a large interest in Chromebooks taking off in the state of North Carolina. Somewhere between 60,000 and 70,000 Chromebooks have been purchased in the state of North Carolina. As well, more and more folks are purchasing them as the days go. So currently, North Carolina districts, we've got 69 school districts that have moved to Google Apps for their email, documents, everything. Now, we have more districts that have not moved over to Google Apps for email but are using it for Google Apps. Just the application side. Now that's harder for us to track, but we are trying to track, okay, who's using what for email and everything else. So today's agenda, we've got a few things that we're going to look over, just a few slides, just like what you've already seen. We're going to dive into a dashboard live demonstration. So, today we want to bring everyone up to speed about the new admin console, where you can find things, what's lost in it, things that you may not have known that you have access to now that you have. As well, a few other things have changed that I want to make sure that you're aware of. And then we're going to dive into the Chrome browser and Chromebook management. So we're going to take about an hour of our time to go through and look at the Chromebook management as well as how you can manage your Chrome browsers. And then we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. If you guys have any questions throughout, you can also post those through the webinar screen. So the old management interface. You've all seen the old management interface where you go in, you see your applications, you see your users, you see the different types of things out there. Now, with the new management interface, things look a whole lot different. All your icons have moved, a lot of your settings have moved. I've gotten numerous emails from folks about, hey, I can't find this anymore, or how do I do this? So from MCNC standpoint, we started getting a lot of questions on it. So we wanted to help provide this information to you guys. So for that, we've decided to go through and provide a training. Now, one of the things that we're going to do is dive in. Many of you that know me, I'm not one for PowerPoint presentations. I'd rather show you exactly how you can do what you can do inside the management console. So, for instance, one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to log in. Is this able to see it pretty well on the screen? Showing up well? Okay, great. So many of you may or may not know, I'm going to sign out of my console here. And I'm actually going to remove both of these. So when you log into your administration console, you can do that by just going to admin.google.com, and it will bring you up to an admin screen. You can also log into your administration console by logging into your email, clicking on the gear sprocket flower that's over on the right hand side, and going to manage this domain. So here I'm going to log into my test domain. So I have one, admin at cne-gapps.mcnc.org. So I'm logging into my administration console. First things that we see is this is a very base, nothing's been done to this administration console. There's only about 10 users that we have inside of this console that we have, or actually just one user currently that we're going to see. So first off, things that we can do, we can manage things a little easier inside of here. So we can go down to the bottom, we can click on our more controls, and we can tailor our admin dashboard, our console, to make it look the things that we want it to see. So for me, I like to always drag up my reports because I'm always pulling reports from my Google Apps consoles. I also like to pull up my groups, and we'll talk more about the groups here in a little bit. The other services are your non-core services of Google Apps that you may turn on or off, such as the YouTube posting or Google's site, excuse me, not Google Sites, but other Google services. So we'll drag that up. Our admin roles, I like to have those. I basically like to drag up most everything for me. The only piece that I leave down in the bottom is my marketplace apps as well as my app engine. You can customize this however you want, but there are some things that you cannot drag and get rid of. Billing, for instance. Now, inside of education does have email and Google Apps for free. So the only piece of the billing that you may have anything listed in there will be for Chromebooks. But you see that I cannot drag it and drop it to get rid of it. So first thing that we want to start off with is we want to go ahead and take a look at our company profile. So for this is my MCNC K-12 test area. Now, if I click on profile, you see that I can change my organization name. So we've got several school districts that have, you know, for instance, I'm just going to take Wayne County Schools. So we've got Wayne County Schools. Well, also they're also known as Wayne County Public Schools. So sometimes you may want it to say one thing or it may say another, whatever the case may be. We can go in and we can make those changes here. Our organization type will be our primary, secondary education, as well our contact information. So this is your primary administrator account. This is who's going to get contacted if all of the accounts are locked out, or if this is your primary person on your Google Apps domain that manages it. This can be changed at any time. Folks don't necessarily stay in a school district for 30 years anymore, or maybe they're in a school district for 30 years but they're not in the same role. So this can be modified at any time. Your secondary email address. Secondary email address must be outside of your domain. It cannot be your at whatever.edu or .k12ncus or whatever the case may be. So we've got to have that as something else. Now, a lot of folks put this as a personal Gmail account, or the district may have a personal Gmail account or something along those lines. You can have it go there. Now, the only time this is used is if everybody in your domain is locked out. All super admins are locked out. It will send a password reset feature to that secondary email address. So you want to make sure that you need that. As well, if something was to happen and you're no longer able to get access to that account or anything along those lines, we do have other ways that we can get access into your domain. Just let us know. User support message. So this is really used more for those districts that have single sign-on or things along those lines that you want to stop users from changing their password, or you want to give them information on how they can change their password. So for here we can say contact technology help desk, if I could type, for resetting your password. As users go to change their password, they'll get prompted with this message telling them, giving them directions on how they can go change their password. Contact technology for it, as well. If they hit that button too many times that says, you know, I can't get in, and they say I forgot my password, they can contact technology to be able to get access into having their password changed. Our time zones. Of course, we want to set ours for United States. And then I can also set my time zone to the Eastern Standard Time. Now, when we set our time zone, this goes ahead and sets it for all of our users. In our K-12 environment, we definitely want to turn off advertisements. In the old days, in the beginning when schools were first started coming on to Google Apps, we had this thing called web clips. Now, when you turn off ads, excuse me, this turns off web clips as well as any advertisements within the Google Apps interface. So our new user features. Google is constantly releasing new features, new services, new different types of things. So you get the choice of being on the scheduled release or the rapid release. Rapid release, you get all the new features as they come out. So Google introduced recently the new email interface. If you've been on Google Apps email for a while, you'll know that they released a new window. Well, if you were on rapid release, as soon as Google released that feature to the general public, you also got it inside of your education domain. A lot of folks like it, a lot of folks don't like it. So you have the option to turn on scheduled release, excuse me, to where scheduled release will come out 1 to 2 weeks after rapid release. It could also be as well 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. By being on scheduled release, that gives you the capability and the time to relay to your users, hey, these new things are coming. Here's some new tutorials on how to take advantage of the new email interface. You can prep your users for what's coming down the line. You can provide the information instead of it being automatically thrown into your users. It also gives time to get the bugs worked out of the system. New services. As I said, new services are constantly coming out to your users. So you can choose whether those are automatically turned on or are they manually turned on for your users. Now, if you are bringing students into your Google Apps domain, it is recommended to be on the manual rather than automated, because there's going to be certain things such as Google Plus that Google releases that you don't want your students to have access to, but you may want your staff. So we want to go ahead and flip that to manual so that I have to turn it on as an administrator of my domain, and it's not automatically turned on as soon as it's released from Google. It also gives you time from the technology department standpoint to test it, make sure that it's going to work inside of your environment. Audit and reporting, this is where we can turn it on to where we can record who's viewing things inside the marketplace, who's adding things into our domain. If you have a Google Analytics account that you're tracking different things on your website, say you're tracking the number of hits that you have on your website, things along those lines, you can set up Google Analytics. This will also provide reporting to you on how many documents are created, how many people are viewing Google Docs on their iPad, on an iOS device versus a laptop, how many people are checking their email on different types of devices. So you can get those out of your Google Analytics. Google Apps desktop features. If you are deploying Chrome to your users, you can deploy the Google Apps desktop feature so that it will automatically launch Google Chrome for their email, for their calendar, as well as for their documents. So it just puts little icons out on your desktop. It's an automated process that you can push out that will just put icons on the user's desktops for email, calendar, and documents. So we also have our end-user clauses and contracts down here that you can review and accept as you need to. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say Save Changes because I did make some changes. Before you go to another screen, make sure you save those changes as they are. So our communication preferences. This is where you can choose as an administrator what information you're getting constantly. Now, this is a great thing to turn on if you are the system administrator for your domain, because you will find out the performance suggestions and updates and feature announcements. This is your communication key to find out what's coming out new from Google. When they release the new email compose window, if you had this turned on as an administrator, you would have gotten this information prior to having it turned on inside of your environment. So as an administrator, you want to turn that feature on to find out what's coming. The offers from Google and feedback and testing, you can turn those on or off as you want to. Now, these emails go to that root administrator, the primary administrator for your account. That's who will get these communications. So our personalization area. Personalization and logo. Many folks have uploaded already their custom logo. I encourage folks to be creative with your logo. Now, you can upload your logo to your Google Apps so that the Google button over in the upper left-hand corner, instead of it saying Google or Gmail or Google Docs, it has your icon up there instead. Okay? So upload your custom logo. Be creative with it. Now, it must be between 143 by 59 pixels. That's small. Make sure you take into account if you have small writing that you're not going to be able to read that inside of your Google Apps interface. Now, for me, if I bring up my MCNC, ignore my email, guys, but you'll see up here we have our MCNC logo. If you are creating your logo from scratch, I encourage you to do it with a transparent background. Transparent background because as users choose their theme, it will show up like ours here. If I choose a orange theme or something like that, our letters will be transparent instead of a white box around it. So I encourage you to make sure that you use a transparent background. And then you show this logo in all sites. This is if your users are creating Google Apps or Google Sites that you're forcing your company logo to be on those sites. So next thing we have is our custom URLs. Now you must be careful with custom URLs. If you have multiple domains inside of one Google Apps, this can mess things up for you. So with all the new changes that Google has, it's become the recommendation right now to leave things in the regular format, the default format, because you can go to mail.google.com, log in there. You can go to gmail.com. You can go to all different types of things and log in. But if you do want to shorten your URL, say you're a district that only has staff involved on Google, or you only have one domain, you can shorten the URL so that when folks go to log in, so if I take this here and I bring up inside of Firefox, it prepends my at cne-gapps.mcnc.org. Now, as well, there is talk about Google taking this away and going to a uniformity login as well. There's also some other things in the rumor mill that will allow you to do multiple URLs. So that's some other things that are coming down the line. But the recommendation currently is to leave it as the default. If you have multiple domains, or if you have one domain, you can change it to the custom URLs. You will have to create CNAME records to point to Google Apps interfaces there. So if I go back to my dashboard, we'll see that we also have our other options up at the top. The next thing that I want to take a look at is our support. Now, with education, everyone has free phone support. Prior to 10 o'clock in the morning, support is provided out of Ireland. After 10 o'clock, it's provided out of Colorado or California. So you are getting English-speaking folks for the most part, you're able to understand what they're saying, different types of things along those lines. So you can go to support, go to your Google Apps, and here I have my 1877 number, and you must get this PIN number. Each time, this is the new way of getting your PIN, you must go get your PIN, and it will expire within 59 minutes or 60 minutes. So it's going to constantly give you a new PIN. This is new. Previously, if you've ever called support, you may have had a sticky note by your computer that had your support PIN number or something like that. The PIN numbers now are generated constantly. Now, Google support. We've had comments before from folks about Google support. Well, all they did was send me to a website. So you've got to understand that Google is an engineering company, is a searching company. So they want you to go out and search for your answer yourself, or if you're calling support, they will work through an issue with you, but at the same time, if it's already out there, they know what the problem is. They want to point you to a area that you can go and work through the problem yourself. And if you still have issues, then you can contact them back. Now, as well, there's online support that you can take advantage of as well. Now, for me, I like to use the email support. So I'll go in and I'll do a email login and submit a, whatever the case may be, contact technical support and submit an email trouble ticket. That's the way that I choose to do most of my support with Google. Now here you'll see that I just have Google Apps. If I had Chromebooks inside of this environment, my Chromebook tab would show up here as well. With the Chromebook, you have the same PIN number all the time. It is a different 1-800 number that you call for Chromebook support versus the Google Apps support. Just make sure that you know that. So our reports area. Now, if you're here for the morning session, you'll see that we're talking about reports inside of here. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about another way that you can get your reports and be able to see a lot of different types of things. So we have our Gmail reports. Notice that inside of this, there's no reports, but for many of you, as you're following along, you'll see that you have reports for your Gmail. You've got reports for your calendar, Drive and Docs. If you've just recently turned up your Google Apps instance, or if you are only beta testing it with certain users, you won't see that many things. Now, once you get to a point that you've rolled out Google Apps for a year, you'll really start seeing your trend going up through the lines. I was on the phone with Cumberland County Schools the other day, and they've got somewhere around 235 terabytes on Google servers now. They've been on Google Apps for a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and since they've gone that route of Google, their data storage on Google has grown while their data storage on site has stayed around the same or gotten smaller. So you can see these different types of graphs are going to show up for you. Now, you've also got the audit log. The audit log is great if you have multiple admins so that you can see who's made what changes inside your administration console. Can't tell you how many times we've had to go back and figure out, okay, who changed somebody's password? And we can see that within the administration inside the admin console for the audit log. You can export this out to a CSV file. You can also change the date range. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can go back and look for it. It only gives you 6 months worth of your logs though. So you're going to want to pull those logs to, if you need to keep a copy of them locally, you're going to want to pull those every 6 months or every 3 months or 1 month, whatever the case may be. So if you need to keep a copy of all those admin logs, I would go through and probably put a calendar reminder to print those out at the first of every month, whatever the case may be. Or just download them as a CSV file and upload them to your Google Docs. So we have our email log. Now this can be used to search back through email. So if you've gotten an email from someone, you're not exactly sure, as an administrator, you got a recipient that received an email and they accidentally, or excuse me, telephone call comes into technology and says, hey, I'm not receiving this email, or I sent this email to someone and they say they're not receiving it. You can go in as an administrator, do a search by the sender or the recipient, and be able to search through your last 7 days, your specify range up to a month, and be able to go and see, okay, I'm looking for an email that admin sent, admin at CNE-GApps sent. I can put in the recipient and I can actually track that email. If it's going off of your site, you can track to make sure that it was delivered to the other server. If it was not delivered, then you get an error message there as well. That user should have gotten an error message. Now as well, if it says that it was delivered to the inbox and it was in your domain, encourage your users to go check their spam folder or go check something else along those lines. So additional reports. You've got several additional reports that you can pull. Now, these have very little data to them. The accounts report shows you the most amount of data to where it gives you, okay, who the account is it an active or suspended account, when was the last time they logged in, different pieces along those lines. So you can take a look at those and be able to upload them into Excel or your Google spreadsheet and be able to analyze those pieces. Now, we're going to talk later on this afternoon about a even better way of pulling those reports and being able to see more information than what you're getting out of this area. You've got your activity report, just shows you how much activity is going on with Google Apps to where you can see those different pieces. Your disk space report, seeing the disk space, how much space are your users using on Google Apps? Your email clients, so how many are using POP3, IMAP versus webmail, whatever the case may be. Now, a new feature that's in the new dashboard is Google Alerts. So you can set up alerts to be sent to different groups of folks. So you've got to be careful with these, because if I was to turn on suspicious login activity, now if I was a large district, 2,000 users, 4,000, 8,000, 50,000 users, this is going to come rather fast, because there are robots always out there trying to log into your Google Apps accounts. So you're going to get a ton of suspicious login activity alerts if you were to turn this on. So that one's not necessarily a recommended piece, but if you are wanting to get notified anytime a user is suspended or new users are added, you can enable that to where certain people are emailed to let you know, hey, a new user was added to your console, to your dashboard, whatever the case may be. Now, this may be used in an environment where you don't have a directory service, where you have individuals out at the schools that are maintaining your Google Apps database. So you may have a media specialist out at the schools as new students come in, that they're adding students in. So as a super admin, you want to know when these users are added. You want to go back in, verify they were stuck in the right area or whatever the case may be. Because if you granted that user access to add students and they added it to the wrong OU, well, now that student has more access to email when they shouldn't have had access to email or whatever the case may be. So you can go in and set these different pieces up. Now we also have our settings area. This is great if you have multiple admins that you need to all get email notified whenever Drive settings change, calendar settings change, Gmail settings, whatever the case may be. This is at a district level, so when somebody goes in and changes Google Drive settings, an email sent to all of your super administrators letting them know, hey, this setting was changed inside of our Gmail or our Drive. You can turn that on as you need to. Now, those alerts will pop up over in the upper right-hand corner where you have the bell with the alerts. They'll pop up there, as well as you'll get them in email. So we're going to skip over groups for right now, and we're going to skip over to other Google services. We're going to go straight into our admin roles. So currently we have our super admin, groups, user management, help desk, and services. Now, super admin has control of your entire domain, can do any and everything they want to your domain, including delete it. So make sure you limit who has access to your super admin, who all has access to be a super admin. You must have at least one super admin within your Google Apps domain. So your groups admin. Groups admin are able to go and create groups. They're able to create new groups. They're able to add people to the groups, different things along those lines. They are not able to change any passwords or do anything to the individual users other than add them to groups. Our user management. Now, this may be hard to see on your screens, I'm not exactly sure, but you'll see that the organizational units is checked, as well as our users. All of these fields are checked. User management is so that you can allow certain people out at the schools to add users. Now, if you're using Active Directory Sync, the directory sync for Active Directory, eDirectory, or LDAP, you're not going to want to use the user management admin, because that sort of overrides what you're allowing different folks to do. Or you're allowing folks to do things out in the field to your administration console that you're not allowing the Google Apps Directory Sync to do. We also have our Help Desk admin. Help Desk admin is allowed to reset passwords, to go in, reset a user's password as they need to. This can also be set up for a teacher. You can add a teacher in there. If students forget their password, you can go in and give a teacher access to reset passwords for a individual school or a set of students or whatever the case may be. And then we have our services admin. Services admin is our email services, our Google Drive settings, our mobile settings, different things along those lines. And then we have our user created roles. So if I wanted to create a new role, I could call this, I'm just going to call this MS Password Reset. So this is my middle school password reset. I can create it, and then I can say, okay, this user has rights to reset and force password changes for our middle school students. I could save changes, and then as I add users to this, then they're allowed to do reset passwords and force password changes. The reason that I did that force password change is because if you look underneath the Help Desk admin, while they can reset a password, they cannot force that user to change their password. So it almost halfway defeats the purpose unless you're maintaining passwords for your users. So we're going to come back to our admin roles here in just a few minutes. We've got to go make some changes, and then we'll come back in and use that MS Password Reset again. So we've also got our security. So for security, I want to go in and take a look at my basic settings. Now, my basic settings, I like to enable SSL. I want to force my users to use Secure Socket when they're using their Google Docs, when they're using their email, or anything like that. Our staff, our students, they go home, they go to Starbucks, they go to conferences. We want to force them to log in and use email securely, because otherwise they may be using just a non-secure port 80, and then their password could be hacked or something along those lines. You also have access to the password strength. Now, users must have at least an 8-character password. Now, if you want to raise that up to 10, you can do that. You can require your users to have a 10-character password if you want to. And then you've got your maximum length. Currently it's set to 100. Now, if you can remember a 100-character password, you're pretty good, because I'm not even close. But you can set that maximum restriction if you want to as well. And then two-step verification. Two-step verification is where your users can have it set up to where they go to log in, and then it will send them a text message, and they must verify that code that they receive on their phone before they're able to get access into their email. This is used a lot in corporate environments, not necessarily in K-12 or education. But you can enable it and allow users to set it up on their own. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. Our password monitoring. Right now, I've only got one user, and he has an 8-character password. So if you're following along, you can click on password monitoring, and you're going to see all of your users. Now, you may see some that have a red line. They don't necessarily have a secure password in place currently. So you may want to pull this report every now and then, go through, take a look at it, and make recommendations to your users saying, hey, I see that your password's not necessarily really secure. How about let's work to make that a little more secure, if you choose to. API reference. So the API reference is if you are planning to use any command line tools, the Google Apps Password Sync, the Google Apps Directory Sync, or any of those tools, you must enable this area. I like to go ahead and enable it because I use the API access a lot. I use certain tools to be able to log into users' admin consoles, do things from a command line basis, things that you're going to see in another session later this afternoon. You must enable the API access if you want to use the Google Apps Directory Sync. If you've got Active Directory, eDirectory, LDAP, whatever the case may be, you can download the Directory Sync and be able to synchronize that. We're going to be taking a look at that later on today. Reporting API. If you want to take advantage of the reporting, you can do so, as well the email migration API. This is not the email migration API for Exchange environments or anything like that. This is where individual users can migrate their email on their own to Google Apps if you chose to go that route. Most districts do it for their users. Go ahead and say Save Changes. And then we want to go to our advanced settings. So if I go to advanced settings, we're going to see over on the right that we have our setup single sign-on. We have a few districts that are using single sign-on through SAML. Now you must be careful using SAML logins for your authentication. The reason being is because SAML works through a web-based authentication system. So you run the risk of having two separate passwords for your Google Apps instance. One is your SAML login, and then two, if you plan to check your email on your smartphone or on an iPad or anything that's non-web-based authentication, you've got to also have a password up on Google. Now, to be able to fix that, we have the Google Apps Password Sync, so that when you change your Active Directory password, it automatically changes your password on Google, and there's also several other things. But you've got to be careful with this in order to be able to select that. Now, as well, for your single sign-on, if you have Chromebooks, Chromebooks do not use the SAML login to be able to authenticate to the Chromebook. They use Google's authentication source. So if we were to go in and set up our single sign-on, you can see that we can enable it. We put in our sign-in page, our sign-out page, and our change password URL. These are there for you to take advantage of, as well as a verification certificate. Now, if you're using SAML, you can put in those different pieces there and be able to use it. We only have a handful of LEAs here in North Carolina that are using a single sign-on currently. Now, inside of our advanced settings, we also have our Manage OAuth domain key. I'm going to go ahead and go into my OAuth domain because I want to enable that consumer key. So I go ahead and enable it. This is used for when you are either A, migrating from Exchange to Google Apps, or you're migrating from GroupWise to Google Apps or Lotus or whatever the case may be. We need to enable that so that we can use some third-party tools to do the migration. This OAuth consumer secret key, that's very much, you're going to have this. Now, as well, we need to enable the OAuth so that you can take advantage of Google Apps directory sync. And then we also have our two-legged OAuth access control that we can turn on for all APIs. Okay, we turn this on. If you have a single domain, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead and turn it on. If you have multiple domains inside of here, you may or may not necessarily want to enable this feature. Especially if you have a student domain and a staff domain, you may or may not want to turn this on. And we'll talk more about that when we get into the directory sync portion later. I need to go ahead and turn that on, don't I? Forgot to turn that on. I hit cancel. I'm going to go ahead and turn both of those on, save my changes. I'm going to go back to my security, my advanced. You can also set up federated ID, Open ID if you want to. Several different ones manage those others as well. And then we have our managed third-party OAuth client access. We will look at this later on, but this is where you see I've said that this client has access to all APIs. That's fine, but as well, if we wanted to limit to only certain APIs, certain sites. For instance, if you are using OpenClass, if you've added OpenClass, you'll see that there is an OpenClass API that's been added to your environment as well. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and then I want to go to my domains, and you'll see currently I only have one domain. I have my primary domain of cne-gapps.mcnc.org. This is great. Now you also see that I have a test domain alias. If I have not moved my MX records to this domain yet, I'm going to still have that alias there that I could use. Otherwise, I could deactivate it if I'm never going to use that. Now, as you add a domain, you can add a domain or a domain alias. If I add a domain alias to it, then everybody that's in my domain will automatically get a second email address. They will all get an alias. So here at MCNC, we have our MCNC main login. Then we also have ncran.net is added as an alias. So if you send an email to jwarf@mcnc.org, or if you send an email to jwarf@ncran.net, I'm going to receive both of those emails. Okay, so it's set up as an alias so that we have multiple domains within it. Now, if you are adding a student domain, you want to add it as another domain. So if you're adding in a student's domain of student.whatever.k12ncus, you can do that here, add in that secondary domain. Now, you may also, I've had several school districts here recently that say, okay, we want to add our students in. We want to add a second domain. Well, we feel our domain is getting way too long of whatever.k12.nc.us. We want to shorten that down for our students. What can we do to do that? You can go out and purchase another domain if you want to. For instance, Wayne County Schools. While theirs is wcps.org currently, they have student.wcps.org, or they could go out and purchase waynestudents.org if you wanted to. For me, I like to separate my staff and students out because I want to know if they're sending an email out that folks know that it's a student. So for me, being at MCNC, I receive an email from a school district or somebody shares a Google document with me. I want to be able to know right off, is it a staff member or is it a student? And through this, I can go through and see those different options. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Now we're going to dive in and take a look at our users. So we've got our users here. I've got my one user. Well, if I look over on the right-hand side, I've got my organizational charts. Yours may already have your OUs in there if you were already a user. Don't let the exclamation point up at the top throw you off. Okay? This is just letting you know that you have the API access turned on and that any changes that you make could be reversed by a directory sync or something along those lines. So over on the right, I'm going to look at my cne-gapps.mcnc.org. I'm going to add a sub-organizational unit. So I clicked on my upside down triangle and clicked Add Sub-Organizational Unit. I could add in here whatever the case that I want to. I could add in staff and tell it to create more organization. I could go back up to it and tell it, okay, also create one called students. Now, just because this says cne-gapps.mcnc.org doesn't necessarily really mean anything for us, okay? That's just the root container, the root name. If I wanted to, I could change that organizational unit to say root, whatever the case may be that I want to do. Now, notice that I did staff and students. Now, the reason that I did that is because I could then go into my staff and add another OU, saying high school, and then inside of my high school, I add a sub-OU called some school. Very creative. So I've got a high school called some school high school. So the reason that I do this is because I have my staff, then I have all of my high schools, all of my middle schools, all of my elementary schools. So I make one setting to my staff, and that's trickled down to all of my schools. Well, as well, if I do my students in that same manner, then all of my students, I then have kindergarten, or if I do by school, I can do it by my elementary, middle, and high schools. Now, if I do this, one of the things that I recommend to folks is to do it by graduation year. Students are less likely to, you're going to have less students fail than you are to move, having to shuffle them around from year to year to year. Now, at the same time, this is if we're managing our Google Apps from our dashboard. Now, if you're using directory sync, there's going to be different things that we're going to do inside of there that we'll look at this afternoon. But if you are manually managing your Google Apps domain, this is how you probably want to set things up, because then you can go and grab all of these users that are in 2024 at the elementary and just move them up to the high school level. Or you may not even want to have the elementary level. You may only want to have students and have 2024, 2023, 2014, 2013, have all of your graduation years in that manner, so that you have all of those students all there together all the time. Because every elementary school gets all the same settings, or every high school gets all the same settings. Now, if you're doing some of the bad words listings, then you're going to have to do some different things, and it's all a matter of how you want to have it set up inside of your LEA. Every LEA is different on how they have this set up. So I've got one school district that has several schools, and we're using Google's bad words filter inside of it. So anytime a student uses a bad word, it will email the assistant principal at the school to deal with the issue. Now, it's a lot of legwork up front, but you're setting up your OUs based upon the students, based upon the schools, and then you set up, okay, each school has their students in it, and then we can set up those different portions. We're going to take more look at that here in just a second. So you can set up your users. You can move your users around. I've got John Wharf up here. If I create additional users, I can add a user, and I want to create Sally Sue. And I can create that user, and then I can easily move Sally from up top. I want to move that user. We've got our suspendeds. Where'd she go? All right, so we have Sally Sue. I'm going to open Sally Sue. We can see her profile real fast. We can see she has 6 Google Apps enabled, 0 groups, 0 licenses assigned to her. That's fine. Our user, we can suspend her or delete her. We can also see that Sally's in the root area. If we go back, up at the top, you see I can add Sally to a group. If I've got Google Groups enabled, I've got several groups, I can go ahead and do that. I can also delete Sally if I need to, or I can move Sally to another organization. I want to move Sally to the staff at the high school. And now Sally, in just a second, you'll see it gets refreshed. And Sally is now going to be over underneath my users. If I turn on my filters, I go to staff, and I go to high school, I see Sally Sue is at the high school as a staff member. You can add in bulk users. You can add in a CSV file of users. When you add in your CSV file of users, all of those users are going to go into your root environment. I'm going to show you how a easier, better way to add those users this afternoon if you're in the session this afternoon. So we've got our users, we've got our OUs, everything along those lines. Next thing we want to do is go to our groups. We can create groups. Notice that your groups are only active once you move to Google Apps email. Now you can go through, create these groups, do all different types of things that you want to, but you're not able to send emails to that group until you fully move to Google Apps for Education for email. So I can create a group called High School. I can call it HS, that's fine. I have my different restrictions. I have my team, I have my announcement only, and my restricted. Team being anyone at the domain can post messages and view the members list. I can also say allow anyone on the internet to post messages. Now you've got to make sure you do that if you set up a group such as your AS400 group. And then you have a group of finance folks that are in the AS400. DPI sends to that list, you got to make sure that you allow folks on the internet to send access to that. Announcement only. Announcement only is great if you only want certain individuals to be able to send to that list. This is great for your all staff mailers. Only the superintendent, senior leadership, and certain individuals need to send to that. You can do the announcement only as well. You also have restricted. Only members of that group can post messages and view the members list. I'm going to go ahead and say create here in just a second. There's also down at the bottom, add all users in this domain to this group. If you check that box and then you add students at a later time, students are added to that group mailer. Okay, so before you add students, make sure you go uncheck that box. Otherwise, students will start receiving emails saying, you know, student Sally Sue's not going to be at school today, or whatever the case may be. You got to be careful with that. So I'm going to go ahead and say create new group. Now this is if you were managing your groups manually by hand. And then I can add Sally Sue, Sally at cne-gapps.mcnc.org. I can add Sally as a member of my group. I can also add Sally as an owner of my group. Now if I would have chose to say announcement only, you must be an owner of the group to send a message to it. So I could add Sally as a member, and then I add me, admin. I can add admin as an owner to the group. Now, if this was a announcement only, admin is the only one that can send emails to the group. Sally can only receive messages, just so that you know the different options that are there. Okay, so we're going to go back. A new feature of your groups is you can now also add aliases to your groups. Now this has actually come up with several districts that needed to be able to create aliases for their groups for different reasons. So that is there and available to you now. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Now we're going to get into some things that we really want to take a look at. Our Google Apps. So I'm going to click on my Google Apps, and you see that I have my calendar, contacts, and different things down through the line. We're going to go to the contacts first. Now, contacts is on for everyone. That's great. I go to my sharing settings, but I see that contacts is turned on, but contact sharing is turned off. We want to enable contact sharing. This contact sharing is your global address book. It's not individuals sharing their contacts with other people. It is the global address book. Now, if you are doing aliases for users, I would probably hide the aliases and only show their primary email address. So when Sally Sue gets married and she becomes Sally Jones, she doesn't have Sally Sue as her alias showing up in the global address book at the same time as Sally Jones. So I like to hide the aliases, and then we can also choose what's browsable in the directory in the contact manager. Show only domain profiles, show only domain shared contacts, or share both profiles and domain shared contacts. In the Active Directory environment, you have shared contacts that you could add into your Exchange server. They're just a shared contact, you add them in. We can do the same thing in the Google Apps environment as well. If you don't want to have a global address book, you can easily disable that global address book. So I'm going to say save settings there because we want to have our contacts in there. And I'm going to go back to my Google Apps. Now, let's go take a look at our calendar. So we've got our calendar. We see it's turned on for everyone. If we did not want to have calendar turned on for everyone, we could go and say on for some organizations. We have our sharing settings. Now we're getting back to the way that things looked originally. One of the things that you're going to want to make sure that you do is go take a look at this. In the root area, I'm clicked on root, my root OU. I see that outside users are able to share only free and busy information. So this is on their primary calendar. Well, as a staff member, I may want to share my calendar with my spouse at home. Well, or I may use my main calendar as my homework calendar as a teacher. Well, now you're allowing me to share it, but I'm only allowed to share free and busy information. That's not necessarily what my parents want to see. They want to see the homework assignments. So maybe we turn that on, share all information, but outsiders cannot change calendars. That would be the lowest level that I would recommend to you to turn on. Now, the other piece down here, the internal sharing options. Notice that by default it's set to share all information. This is not recommended. Go change this to either no sharing or only free and busy information. Especially, take a look at it from this standpoint. Your superintendent has their calendar on Google. They don't want everybody to see their calendar in the organization. So we need to turn that to no sharing, or at the very minimum, only free and busy information. Because as well, once you bring on students, students then could see the superintendent's calendar, could see technology director's calendar, whatever the case may be. I like to go to no sharing. This is the default option, and then for internal sharing of the calendar within the organization, I like to go to no sharing myself. Now, if it's students, if you're on the student OU, you can actually go to the student OU and change them to where all information is shared if you want to, or whatever the case may be. Now, with calendaring, super admins have access to see anyone in the organization's calendar. Okay? Super admins can go and see anybody in the organization's calendar without having access to it. Okay? So the other thing, resources. I always get this question about, well, we've got this resource calendar. Can we create it inside of Google? Yes, you can create resource calendars inside of Google, but I don't recommend it inside of a school situation. If you're one school, charter school, that's fine. If you are a school district of 37 schools, I may not go that route. Because if I create a calendar resource and name it boardroom, Anybody in the school district can go and reserve the boardroom at any time, staff or student. If they have an account within the domain, they can reserve it. It's great for companies and organizations that are not education. MCNC, we use the calendar resources because we have meeting rooms and things like that. Only MCNC employees have access to it. We're one company, one campus. So to do away with that, to be able to do it still in an organization such as education, I recommend you to create a calendar account and then go create those other calendars underneath that calendar email account. So you can say, okay, you have a calendar at whatever your district. Well, create a whole bunch of calendars underneath there and then grant access to those individuals that need access to those calendars. So we set up that boardroom calendar, but only central office folks have access to that calendar to place events on it, or other different types of things. You can also create a Google form that will create events and place it on a calendar for you after they've been approved. So an approval process of creating events on calendars, if needed, is also available and able to be done too. So general settings for our calendars. Notice that we also have this setting for external secondary calendars. Well, we told our staff that they could create calendars for homework. Homework for our first period class, homework for our second period class, whatever the case may be, we can do that as well. So we want to share all the information, but outsiders cannot change those calendars there as well. Okay, so we've also got the free and busy calendar. If you have a web service that you want to tie this back into Exchange or something along those lines, we can set that up as well. And then if you're allowing labs, you can then allow the labs as well within your environment. So I'm going to go back to my Google Apps, and I'm going to go down to my Drive. This is my Google Drive sharing settings. With so many districts across North Carolina that are using Google Docs, Google Drive, we want to share those calendars with others, allow our teachers to share calendars, or excuse me, documents. Now, with that, we want to grant them access to share outside of the domain. We don't have the capability at this point to limit students. It's either all or none. So if we allow staff to share outside of the district, we allow students to share documents outside of the district. Now that comes into an education area. We've got to educate our users how to properly share their documents safely and securely to where the world won't be able to access them. And then we have our document visibility. The default is set to private. Do not turn it to this organization or people at the organization with the link, because others will be able to access your document, be able to find your document within the organization. We also have the transfer ownership. You can transfer ownership of documents. This is where you would do that. So if you have a staff member to leave the organization, you can transfer all of their documents at one time to another individual if needed. Now, what I recommend to you to do is set up an account to transfer these documents into first, or reset the password, go look at the individual's documents. Don't transfer personal documents. Somebody may have left the school district. Well, they didn't trash their personal documents. You need to transfer those to their replacement. Well, they may have had personal documents that they created, things like that. Go in, make sure that they didn't have any personal ones. If they did, trash those, and then transfer all the other documents if needed. General settings. We've got our general settings. We have our offline capability. You're starting to see more and more with the offline capability, especially with Chromebooks. Students go home. Students get on the bus. They need to have access to edit their documents. We can give them that access through offline mode. Grant them access to doing their documents offline. Google Docs Audit. I like to turn this on. This is a new feature that admins can see how many documents are created, shared within your organization, things along those lines. Now, there's several third-party applications that you can add into that will give you even more granular. We've got a couple of school districts that have purchased CloudLock here in North Carolina, to where an administrator gets an email every day letting you know how many documents were shared within the organization. This also gives you the access to being able to see, okay, did somebody create a Google Doc with a social security number? Now, in that type of situation, did they create a Google Doc? Did they share that Google Doc with somebody outside the organization or somewhere else, whatever the case may be? You can limit who can share what types of documents if you're using third-party applications. Google Drive, you can allow your users to install Google Drive if you want to, allow them to download it and install on their Mac or PC. That's completely up to you as a district. So you see I've been logged out. We still, with the new administration console, you are limited to being logged in for 1 hour. After you've been logged in for 1 hour, it will kick you out and all changes that you made are gone. So I've got to go back in and enable my document audit and to save that again. Templates, by default, is turned on, but you have templates for business forms, things like that. These don't work for education. You need to go in and create categories for education, such as high school. Add that. Or math. Things along those lines. So if teachers are creating documents, or maybe lesson plans, teachers are creating lesson plan templates, they can tag it as a category of lesson plans and have it posted online and available for other staff members across the district to use. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I can see, we can see the number of documents that were created inside of my domain here. We're not going to see very many. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to skip over email first, and then I'm going to go to sites. We have our Google Sites. If you're using Google Sites, you can allow Google Sites to be used for staff and students. A lot of schools I'm starting to see are using Google Sites as a way of student portfolios. Students start creating documents, posting those out there, and they travel with them as they go on through school. We can allow our users, we can see based upon the OU that they're in, we can say students cannot create sites, but staff members can create sites if you choose to. You can also choose the visibility. By default, they're set to private, only the visibility is to the site owner, or they're automatically open to anyone within the domain. Now, just like with calendars, super admins can see any website that's in your domain and can edit that website. Now, this is a safety precaution, so, students create websites or staff members create websites. Super admins can go in and edit those websites at any time. So I've got my access settings. So you see that I can say that outside of my MCNC K-12 test domain, users cannot create sites outside, or they can share outside, whatever the case may be. Right now mine's set to without any warning. I want to warn my users when they're sharing websites outside the domain. Unless you really are starting to really take advantage of it, warn your users that they're sharing something outside of your domain. And same thing as with the document templates, you can also set up templates for your schools. Now, I've had a couple of school districts that have started taking the initiative to create They're creating templates for their teachers inside of individual schools. So you may have an elementary school called Sally Sue Elementary School. Well, at that elementary school, you create a template for all of those teachers to use. They can take advantage of it. They can use that category. So we could say Sally Sue Elementary and add that in there. Okay? Have access to add those in there. Add those in just like you would with anything else. Now we want to go back, and now I'm ready to go down to Talks and Hangouts. So Google Talk has now become Google Hangout. Hangout to where you can do video conferencing, you can do audio conferencing, different types of things. Now my sharing settings, right now I do not have the new version of Hangouts enabled. The new version of Hangouts takes advantage of Google Plus and the settings that you have within Google Plus. So I have it turned off here to where I can have more access to controlling different types of things. So I can go down and I can say, okay, for my staff, I want to enable the new Hangout features. That's fine. Yes, I've read all of these. You know, I went through and read them. So I have less capability and access to controlling different types of features. But I can go down to my students and it's turned off. So then I can go down to the very bottom to where I have additional resources, and I can say that students are not allowed to make voice calls or video calls or place phone calls from their Google Apps environment. So I can turn those off. I can also say we have the checkbox to automatically accept invitations. I would not turn that on. I had one school district to turn that on, and they quickly went back and turned it off. The technology director started getting chats from individuals in the schools that really they should have went through the technology help desk first or something along those lines. So they quickly turned that feature off. So we have also our chat options. So I'm still on my students. I can warn my users when they're chatting outside, or I can say, my students, they have chat capability, but they cannot chat outside of the domain. And then we also have the chat status. We can also disable chat history by forcing everything to be off the record. Now, inside of the settings, we do not have the capability to say automatically always force everything to be on the record. Okay? Individuals can go and turn their chat to be off the record so it's not recorded in their log. So, something else to note. The only way that chat, from my knowledge and my understanding, can be archived, recorded, is inside of their area, or if you're using Google Vault. If you're using Google Vault, chat messages are archived and recorded in the Google Vault environment because it's saved as a message, it's then recorded. But if they disable their, if they go off the record, that's not recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and say save. And I've got my chat settings. Now if I go back up to staff where I enabled the new Hangouts feature, I can see that I only really have a few things. Users can chat with other users outside. Yes, we want to allow that with our staff members. If you're on Google, and for me, I use Google Chat all the time. It gives me a way to communicate with school districts. I'm in a meeting, whatever the case may be. Someone has a real quick question they need to ask. They can hit me up on chat, say, are you busy? I have a quick question, or whatever the case may be. Or we can schedule a meeting based upon the chat. And then as well, we have allow users to place voice and video calls. That's one option. It's not broken down into 3 options. It's one option and one option only. And then the default for users, the default history and everything. So I'm going to hit save there. And I'm going to go back to my talk settings. So one thing that we have not done and I have not done it on purpose because I like to do it inside the Talk Hangouts area, is we say that it's turned on for everyone. Well, this is where previously in the old environment, you just went to the services and you turned on and off the different pieces that you wanted. This is more cumbersome to turn on and off for your users. We can't turn it on and off based upon we go to that OU in our users area and we just turn off everything that we want to. Now we have to go to each service and turn it on or off based upon the OU. So if I go and I say on for some organizations, I click. Now I can go to my students and I can say override and turn chat off for my students. Now it then also turns off Google Plus, which I don't want on for my students anyhow, and now it's overwritten and turned off for my students. Now, notice that I had to go and do that from the Google Talk area. In order to turn off any of the other things, I've got to go and turn it off for those as well too. So if I go back to my Google Apps, and if I decided for my calendar I didn't want my students, I got to go say on for some and turn off calendar for my students as well in that area. Okay? So if I go back to my Google Apps, now we're going to hit the big one of email. So if you are using Google Apps for your email, you've probably seen a lot of these settings, but as well, we're going to go ahead and go through and talk about a couple of them. Our user settings. Just like in the old environment, we can turn on and off different types of settings for our users. We can go to our root level, and we can see what our MX records are pointed to. These are your MX records for your default domain. The primary domain is where the MX records are pulled from. So we can allow users to use the email API. Notice that we talked about that earlier, that users could use an API to upload their email to their accounts. As well, if you enable that, then you can enable users to POP3 or import their mail from Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL, or any of those other services. Most of the time, we don't enable that option. Let your users choose their own theme. We talked about doing the other pieces there that would start up in that area and everything. So we also have our read receipts. Now, if you came from a group-wise environment or are still in a group-wise environment, you will see that read receipts are allowed inside of Google, but they're not the same as in group-wise. There's only 2 email systems that I know of that would actually tell you if somebody read an email without them actually telling you that they read it. And that is GroupWise and First Class, both of which a lot of folks have migrated off of for different reasons, but this has been the biggest complaint is they don't have that capability to see whether somebody actually read their email or not. So, but you can turn on read receipts, allow users to do read receipts, but the users can choose whether they have actually read it or not. We have mail delegation. Mail delegation is really for your folks that need to delegate their mailbox to somebody else. Superintendent delegates their mailbox to a admin assistant or whatever the case may be. Name format. You've got your first and last name format. Now, I've had several questions from folks whenever people get married, things like that. Their name will automatically change as you change it in your email settings or inside of the Google Apps directory sync. The piece that you've got to be careful of is if you have Google Plus turned on and Sally Sue goes in and changes her name in her profile of Google Plus, that actually takes precedence over to other areas. So we've actually had folks that a student for a parent set up the Google Plus account thinking they were logged in as them, and then instead of it saying, you know, Johnny Smith, it said, you know, Jonathan Smith or something else that it wasn't supposed to say. So if you have Google Plus enabled, make sure you encourage your folks to make sure they use that profile name of what they're supposed to be using. Or if you've got somebody that in your directory is William Smith, but yet they like to be called Bill, inside of the Google Plus, they may reference themselves as Bill Smith, and then it's going to change inside of your global address book. Just something for you to be aware of. We can disable POP and IMAP if you want to for your users. Most folks have all gone away from using BlackBerry Enterprise servers. But if you still needed to use a BES server, you could use that if you needed to. You can also download Google Apps for Microsoft Outlook. The Google Apps sync for Microsoft Outlook does work. You will see less functionality if you go the route of using Microsoft Outlook than using the straight web interface. Automatic forwarding. A lot of districts turn this off. So you don't want your users automatically forwarding their email to somewhere else. Seen actually yesterday working with a district, and they actually had some users that were forwarding all of their email to a personal Gmail account. Now, as soon as it came into the school account, they were forwarding it over to the personal Gmail. That's not necessarily a recommended practice for education or business or anything. So a lot of folks end up going in and turning that off. Offline Gmail. If you want to have access to your Gmail while you're offline, turn that feature on and have it available. So we have our per user outbound gateway. If you want to allow folks to send through an external SMTP server, you can allow that if you want to. We have our email whitelist. Put in the IP address of servers that are on the outside of your network, or could be the inside of your network. For instance, if you have DPI's mail server, not their mail server, but their listserv server. It's an IP address that we like to put in because, you know, sometimes those messages get marked as spam or whatever the case. You can put in DPI's IP address of their server and then be able to have it automatically whitelisted. And that is list.dpi.state.nc.us. As well, if you have internal servers such as your network monitoring server, something like that, sends automated emails, you can set that up to go from there. Inbound gateway, we've really only used these inbound gateways if you're maintaining a spam filter at your local LEA. So you can set that up. We can use an inbound filter if you need to. Spam creates approved spam senders list that will bypass your spam folder if you need to. You can also set up domain names inside of this area as well. Block senders. I see this used a lot during election time. You've got folks that are just spamming your domain with mail. You've issued the, please quit sending to our domain or limit your emails, whatever the case. They don't do it. Then you can go in and block those senders in your email. We also have the compliance email retention area. Now, this is not an email retention that you're going to want to use, because what it will do is automatically move email to a trash can after 30 days or 60 days or whatever you've set up. And then after 30 days in the trash, it's automatically deleted for your users. It's not recommended to really use that. Some businesses use that, but we don't necessarily want to take advantage of it here. We have our append footer. You can append your footer in any case that you want to. Now, if you're needing a list of footers that you may want to take a look at, I have a Google document that I can share with you that you can go through, see what several other districts have used, from the short and sweet, this email can be seen by anyone by public request, to the ones that state the state general statute and things along those lines. So we can append that footer. As well, I recommend to you to put a special footer on student emails to say this email was sent from a student-based email account within whatever your school district. And then if this account is being abused, send an email to tech support at whatever, or if you have a help desk, something along those lines, you can have that set up inside of there as well. Restrict delivery. Now, this is great for our students. We can restrict the delivery to say that they're only allowed to communicate with certain domains. They're allowed to communicate with K12NCUS domains. They're allowed to communicate only with our domain. We can make those restrictions inside of here. Content compliance. We can use content compliance to be able to do filtering based upon words, phrases, or patterns. With that, we can go in and say inbound and outbound email, as well as internal and external receiving. Now, this is also where we set up content compliance, is where we would also used to set up Barracuda boxes. Some of those things have changed, and we'll be looking at that here in just a second. Objectable content. You heard me talk about the bad words list earlier. We can set up a bad words list inside of here. We've got a running list of somewhere close to over 1,000 bad words that we can dump in there and allow you to do that. Now, what we can also do is say, okay, if anybody uses a bad word, we can tell it to change the route of the message. We can tell it to change the route, or we can change the recipient. Replace the recipient with somebody else. Or we can just change the existing username, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, we change the recipient, we replace it with an administrator at the school. That way, you're able to intercept the email before it was to go to a student. Now, this can also be used for somebody mentions the word knife. They mention the word suicide, or whatever the case may be. You can place words in there and have it kick an email off to different individuals to go out and look at. No, it is sort of a replacement for Gaggle if you're not looking to have to pay a third-party source for filtering. But as well, you can also use the Gaggle source as well to do your email filtering for students. We can also, instead of just changing the recipient, we can just add more people to receiving the message. So they would actually know, hey, the principal received that message as well. We have those options and availability. Attachment compliance. We have our attachment compliance. We can do inbound, outbound, whatever the case may be. By default, Google does not allow EXEs, any type of executable files, viruses, or anything like that through their system. One of the new big things is ransomware. The CryptoLocker, supposedly some folks have tested it. It's not making it through Google's servers. Now, if you are using a Barracuda box at your head end, it may make it past there and still make it into your Google Apps email if you're not using Google spam filtering. Just something to take a look at and make sure that you're up to compliance with that. So we're going to skip through these pieces here. Our send routing, things along those lines. Those are really only if you're custom setups. And then our mail relay, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and save my settings. So we've talked a lot about the Google Apps settings. Now, one of the other things that I want to take you and show you is the other Google services. And then we're going to open up for a couple of questions before we hit the Chrome management. So we see our other services that are out there and available. Now, for me, everything is on for everyone except for Google+. I recommend to you to definitely go turn Google+ off for your students. You can turn it on for your staff if you want to, but turn it off for your students because you must be 13 years of age or older in order to take advantage of Google+. If a staff member puts in their wrong birth date year and they accidentally marked that they're under the age of 13, we can make those changes. But if anybody marks that they're under the age of 13 with the Google Plus area turned on, then it will automatically suspend their account, and within 30 days it will delete their account off of your profile. So you may or may not find out within that time frame. So just something to be aware of. Make sure you only allow Google Plus for your staff at this time, unless you want to enable it for students and make sure that they're at the high school level. So down at the bottom, you see we have YouTube. YouTube is on for everyone. What this does is this allows folks to create a YouTube channel with your domain. This does not stop them from accessing YouTube, but it allows them to post videos on your domain. So for me, my mcnc.org address, it's turned on, so I'm allowed to post videos to YouTube from my MCNC account. You can go in and turn that on and off as you choose or as you see fit. You can also, you see we have Chrome Sync is turned on. Gives you the access to synchronize your bookmarks across multiple computers as well as other pieces within your Chrome environment. And then Chrome Management, configuring your browser policies. Now we want to talk about that here in just a second, but Tim, you said we may have a question or two.
The first one was how many users can be in one of those groups to send out mass emails? There's still a limit.
Okay, so the question is there a limit to the number of users that you can put in a group? I'm not sure of a limit on users. I know I have a group in one district that's around 8,000 users. And as you send, and I'll add that to the resources area to where you guys can see that. And the presentation from earlier is going to be sent out to everyone that has the resources on it. But I'll add that in there to the restrictions on email. How many people can you have on a single email? How many emails can you send a day? That type of thing. I'll have that added in there for you.
The other one was centered around calendar sharing from staff to students. We've had some issues with staff calendars that are shared with our students. Is there a setting to help with this? And it goes on to clarify. The students cannot view the staff members' calendar for student life clubs, etc. This is a question from Jonathan. So we might have to follow up with him.
Yeah, I'm going to need a little more information on the calendar sharing question. So we'll follow up, and we'll also put that in the show notes for today to put that in there, the question and the follow-up answer for it as well.
And the last one was super admin and have tried to share my calendar, but no one can see it. And is that a normal behavior?
As a super admin, you should be able to share your calendar with no problems with anyone within the domain. It may be a sharing setting that we need to take a look at with them, but we can follow up with you as well. But super admins are just like anyone else. They can share their calendar in the same manner as a teacher or staff member.
I'll pull the list of these so we can follow up after.
Okay, so the next thing that I want to take a look at with you guys, I've got to sign out of this one and log into a different account. I have my Chromebooks in a different domain. So you'll see this one is actually still the old management interface. The new management interface looks a lot the same way once you get into the Chrome management. Now, something that you need to be aware of, when you push out these Chrome management settings in the user settings area, that goes to Chromebooks as well Chrome browser. The reason I bring that up is because we're going to talk about how you can push content filtering pack files, and when you push them out in this manner, it also goes if they authenticate to their home machine in their Chrome browser at home. So we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But I've got my Chrome management settings here. I've got my policy refresh rate. Notice that I have mine set at 30 minutes. The reason that I have mine set at 30 minutes is because we're constantly making changes inside of our environment that we want to be able to push out quickly and easily to all of our users. So I've got mine set to 30 minutes. After you get your policy set and out to your users, you can raise this up to an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case may be, to make sure that these Chrome settings get out to your users in a timely manner. If you know that you're going to be making some policy changes to get ready for testing or anything along those lines, make sure you go in a week or so ahead of time, lower that down to the 30-minute interval. That's the lowest that we can set it. So, allowed types of apps and extensions. We're allowing extensions, themes, Google Apps Script, hosted app, everything from my environment. Now, be aware, there are several extensions and themes that are coming out that may or may not be suitable for our students. So if you want to limit your theme interaction with the Chrome environment, you can limit that, different things along those lines. Pre-installed apps and extensions. Currently, you see I'm pushing 3 apps will automatically be installed on my users' machines. So if I go to my Manage Pre-installed Apps, you'll see that I'm pushing Secure Shell, a Google Calculator, and a Google Calendar. Now, the reason I'm pushing these is because I want them to be on all users' devices. Well, if I click on High School, you'll see that there's a list of a lot of devices that we can, or excuse me, applications that we can add into our user's environment. So we need to have the conversation of apps versus extensions. In the Chromebook and Google browser environment, you have apps. Apps are nothing more than shortcuts to websites. Okay? Everything within that environment is a website where you're doing things on the web. It's not actually an application that's installed on the local device. It's more installed in the cloud, and you're using a cloud-based website to access. An extension is just like for my bar up here. It's not inside of that one. If I go over to my other one, you'll see that I have a Google Plus one up here so that I can read my voicemail, see my voicemail, whatever the case may be. I can see that up there at the top. So I have my Google Voice extension. So those are extensions, shortcut ways of doing things. So I have my allowed apps and extensions. Right now, we're allowing all apps and extensions except the ones we block. Well, that's not necessarily a recommended practice now. In the early days, we could do that because there weren't proxies that were coming out in this manner. There were not other things that were coming out. Now, most districts are blocking all apps and extensions except the ones they want to allow. And then we can manage that and say, okay, these are the apps that they're allowed to add. And I can say, okay, they're allowed to add all of the free apps from the high school. They're allowed to add all the free apps from the middle school, the elementary school. They're allowed to add all the free apps, whatever the case may be. And I can save that. Now there's 26 apps that my students could add to their Chrome environment or their Chromebook. You're going to want to take a look and pick through those. Now, I recommend you to do this for your students and leave your staff open, because staff are going to be the ones that are going out finding the applications that they want to use inside of their classroom. This will also cut down on some of your headache of, I want to use this, or I tried this in my personal and I want to try it in my work environment, or whatever the case may be. If you're allowing your teachers to go out and find the apps that they're going to need for the class, then you can add them to the allowed extensions for folks to add. So we've also got our pinned apps and extensions. Pinned apps are what on a Chromebook are down along where that start bar is. That start bar may hide itself automatically, or it may always show whatever the case is that you have set up. But that's pinned apps and extensions. If you start to pin apps to that dashboard, you need to be very careful with it, because it erases anything that's already there, and the user is not allowed to add things to the bar down there. You're managing it for them. So if you want to allow your users to drag and add things to it as they want to, don't push pinned apps to it. Okay? So the next thing we have is the Chrome Web Store. The default is to go to the default web page, or you can set it up to go to your collection. Here I've got my 4 K-12G apps. So this would be the apps and extensions that I've allowed. I've said, hey, these are ones that we've said you can have. Makes life easier for your students to be able to access. And I can also say, allow that, display it. Which private apps should be included. I'll choose the private apps and extensions to include. That's fine. Or you can say, include all the private apps and extensions from my domain. It's completely up to you which one you want to do. So we have our Chrome Web Store policy. We want to allow users to publish apps, private apps to that. That's up to you. We have some districts that are starting to allow users to create their own themes. There's one school district out in the eastern part, they were starting to create themes and are publishing them out into the Chrome store for other schools to take advantage of. So you may want to allow your folks to publish those, or you may not want to. We have our password manager. Never allow the use of a password manager is what I have. I have this chosen because we want students to remember their passwords. Or don't save your password on the machine because what if something happens to it? Whatever the case may be. So that's up to you whether you want to allow the user to configure that or do you want to never use password managers. We also have the show password button. I'm not a big one for showing the password button. I want you to see those asterisks and you're typing it in as you're going. I don't want you to hit that show password button and the person that's standing behind you sees your password as well. So for security purposes, I like to turn that show password button off. We also have the screen lock. We want to lock the screen on idle, allow the user to configure, or never lock the screen. If this is a teacher, we definitely want to lock their screen. This is a Chromebook setting. Okay, notice the Chromebook there only applies to Chromebook devices, Chrome devices. Incognito mode. Not a good thing for your students to have access to incognito mode. Incognito mode is what I'm using here. You see my little guy up there at the top right. This allows me to go to open up multiple tabs and not necessarily trace where I've been. So I like to disallow incognito mode for my students. Now at the same time, if we're not allowing them to go incognito mode, we want to always save their browser history. Because our students, this gives us another way to find out, okay, I'm getting reports that Sally is going to websites that she shouldn't. Well, if I know her password or I can change her password, I can now see all the websites that she's been to based upon her browser history. Safe browsing. Safe browsing in this manner is websites with malicious content. Okay, we're going to get down in just a second to where we can enable safe search, but safe browsing is like your malicious sites. Well, do we want to prevent users from going to malicious sites? This is a browser feature as well. So if they go to a website that may have some content on it that installs spyware or bad cookies on their machine, we can prevent them from going to those websites. Okay, that will also help prevent some of those pop-up ads that they may see on different websites. Geolocation, that's really only for your Chromebook-based devices. Here you see my proxy settings. Down in the network, proxy settings. It's set to never use a proxy. Now, if you're using Zscaler, or you're using Lightspeed, or you're using anything else that uses an auto-configured pack file, we can automatically push that. Now, this is where I want you to be careful because your users need to understand that if they go home to their home machine and they authenticate to their Chrome browser, you'll notice that I'm logged in as my personal account here. If they would have logged in with their school account, that they would get Zscaler content filtering or light speed content filtering on their home machine. Now, at the same time, this is where we set it to do our content filtering for Chromebook devices. Students and staff are going to have to learn how to separate personal from work or personal from school. So when they go home on their personal machine, they're going to want to synchronize. Yes, they're going to want to synchronize with school stuff, school bookmarks, but they're going to have to understand they're also going to get the pack file. They're also going to get Zscaler or Lightspeed content filtering at home too. So if they don't want that, then they're going to have to utilize a personal email account to synchronize at home, and at school they'll use the school account. I'm going to change that back because I'm not going to use the pack file currently for this device. So our home button, we can set up the home button if we want to. Always show the home button, never show, allow the user to configure. That's completely up to you. Most of the time, we allow the user to configure those. Now the startup pages, though, folks tend to set those for your students. In the student area, we can say load up mail.google.com, load up drive.google.com, and calendar. That way my students are prepared for the day. So I set that up. They're automatically, when they log in, it's going to automatically load those 3 websites. Yes, that could be a big hit at that moment to load all 3 of those on the network, but at the same time it gets my students ready for the day. Safe search. We can always use safe search with our users. We can force that here, just like you're forcing that inside of your content filters to use safe search. Screenshots. Do you want to allow screenshots or do you not? Client certificates. This is for websites. This is not your CA certs or anything like that. So these are for websites. We've got our cookie settings. Do you want to allow the users to set cookies or allow websites to set cookies? Whatever the case may be, you can set those up there if you want to. Our third-party cookie blocking, we can not allow third-party cookies or allow. That goes along with your what patterns do you allow for cookies. Images. Do you allow images or do you not allow images to show up? We can set those. We can block images on certain sites. If you wanted to stop Google image searches, you could put in images.google.com and we can say don't load images from this site. JavaScript, we of course want to allow JavaScript. There's a lot of things that use it. Notifications being desktop notifications. I'm going to scroll down past my plugins to where we get to the pop-ups. Allow the user to configure. Now we're getting into the online testing settings. Now, for online testing, you need to make sure that you allow pop-ups. Now, at the same time, we can allow pop-ups on these sites. Put in the ncsu.edu site, and then it will automatically allow pop-ups. We also have URL blacklisting. Now, for online testing with Chromebook devices, we can put in an asterisk here, and it will block every website from that device being able to access the internet. Then we go down to the URL exceptions, and we can say only these websites are able to be loaded. So ncsu.edu, that's where the testing data is coming from. There's 3 or 4 sites that are allowed for that. We will send you guys the link, so if you have Chromebooks, NC State has already produced out the information on what you will need to do to give your Chromebooks a secure testing environment. We'll push that out to you guys as well. So we also have our Google Drive syncing. Do you want to allow the users to sync their Google Drive for offline capabilities? Do you want to allow to use cellular connections? We don't have very many, but there are a few districts that have the cellular Chromebook devices. Printing. You can turn on and off printing from your Chrome browser. Now, you got to be careful with this because this affects the Chrome browser as well as Chromebooks. So while you don't want them to print from the Chromebooks, you may still want to allow them to print from the Chrome browser that you may have set up in the media center. So you've got to be careful with that. Bookmarks bar, do you want to allow the user to enable or disable the bookmark bar? That's up to you. We've got our bookmark editing. Now, if you're creating an online testing user, we want to put that user in a special OU called testing. And then we want to turn off that bookmarks editing. We also want to turn off several other things so that we don't allow the users. We're going to have another webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks for online testing, going through the management for securing your browser. So be on the lookout for that as well. Google Chrome Instant being as you're typing in that it automatically pops up with the information that you want it to for your search engine. Spell check, do you allow spell check? Do you allow translation, developer tools, preform, all the different types of things. Now you also have, for your Chromebooks, you have the SD and USB cards. Do you allow those? Microphones, input, output, do you allow those types of things to be allowed on your Chromebook devices? Now the next thing, I know we're getting close on time, so I'm going to try to jump through here a little bit. We may end up going over just a few minutes from where we started. But if I go to my device settings, I have my enroll devices automatically. I have that set to do not allow. Well, if I enable that, this is after a device is enrolled initially, then you can allow anyone to enroll that device, re-enroll it back into your domain if you need to. This is also, you need to turn this on in order to take advantage of white glove treatments if you're purchasing that from a third-party vendor. Cloud print, this is new. If you want to be able to take advantage of the cloud print, this is a way that you can manage this service to be able to have your Chromebooks to print to a cloud-based printer in your school. Or you can set up a print server to manage those cloud-based printing applications. Guest mode. I turn off guest mode on my Chromebook devices. I turn that to do not allow guest mode. That way I'm restricting who can log in to my devices. Well, right now we have ours set to @mailbox.mcnc.org, @K12, and then I also have this Gmail one here. If I take that Gmail one off, then you must log in with one of those two domains in order to get access to our Chromebook devices. Now, as well, if you have your devices in a certain organizational unit, so if I moved all of my devices to the CERT test area, then I can say only the testing user is allowed to log in to that device and have that capability. User data. Do not erase your data off of the local hard drive unless you are in a one-to-many environment. If you are in a one-to-one environment, I do not recommend erasing the data after the user logs off of the machine. Your power management, the sign-in screen. I have mine set to never show usernames and photos. I like to have my users type in their username and their password. As well, if you're showing the usernames and photos, it's going to record up to 5 or 6 different users on your screen. Their icons will all be populated with their pictures. Now, students may or may not choose the proper picture to have show up on your Chromebook, and if they then log into 5 different Chromebooks, their picture is showing up on 5 different Chromebooks in your environment. So I like to turn that feature off. Schedule reboot. You can tell it how often do you want to schedule a reboot of your devices. Force your devices to reboot every so often if you want to. Auto update. This can be good and it can be bad. The reason it can be bad is if a update comes out and there's a bug right off the bat. Google is just like every other browser. They have issues whenever they first come out. Chrome 26 came out and we've seen some errors with it. So with that, some people went back and said, don't automatically update. We'll push out an update when we're ready. Or if you choose to, you can automatically allow updates, but you can tell it to only go to the version 30. Don't go to version 31 yet. I'm not ready for my users to have that. You can do that. And then you can also randomly scatter updates over a different period and allow auto reboots after the update has been pushed out. And then we've also got our time zone down at the bottom where we can automatically set Eastern Standard Time for our users. Or excuse me, our devices. Now, we have shipments. Shipments will only show up if you order your devices from a partner of Google's. So if you order your devices from Amazon and then we add in later on the management license, they're not going to show up in your shipment area. If you order from somewhere like CDWG, Primevo, Cloud Sherpa, something like that, they are all partners with Google to where they will show up inside of your shipments area to where you can track, hey, when do we order that Chromebook, or when do we order that big, large assortment of Chromebooks? And then we have also our networks. So notice that we are pushing out several SSIDs. We've got one called Home MCNC that we're pushing out to our users. That's great. You can add in your Wi-Fi networks for users or devices. Don't push out wireless networks on both. Choose one or the other. The reason being is because it will get confused and it will disconnect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect. We've seen that in the past. So we recommend to folks choose one either based upon the user or the device logging into your wireless networks. Now, new thing that we now have and can take advantage of is our managed certificates. Inside of our networks, we can manage certificates. Notice that I've added 2 certificates. I've added the 2 Zscaler certificates into my environment. This is the same thing for your Sophos and Lightspeed environments as well. That if you are doing pack files and you're doing SSL inspection, that you've got to have certificates installed on. So you add your certificates, and then you need to make sure that you have the checkbox next to use this certificate as an HTTPS certificate authority. This will then push the certificate to your users. This is underneath the user settings and not devices. Google still has the capability to push out the certificates to users, but they're not doing it to the device level. So we push it out to all of our users after they authenticate to the device. So I've got several resources that I've got posted up here, and this presentation is going to be available to you guys afterwards as well. I've got to add a few more resources to it so that you can take advantage of it. But we've got some additional admin training that you can go through. This is a part of the Google Apps certification. If you're looking to get the certification for Google, you can go through there and do that as well. We also have the Chromebook SSL, where you can read more about the Chromebook SSL. We've got the Google Apps status page. If you don't know what the Google Apps status page is, if Google is ever having an issue, they will post to this website letting you know, hey, we've got this going on with Google, we're seeing this outage. We've also got the Google Enterprise blog that you can also subscribe to find out new features that are coming down the line, different things that you may want to take advantage of. And as well, MCNC is available to you guys to work with you, partner with you. If you have any questions, concerns about your Chromebooks, Google Apps management, we work with several folks and we'll be available to work with you guys as well. So we've got another training coming up later on today as well as next week that we're going to be providing different pieces, different aspects, and these webinars are being recorded and being streamed. They're being recorded so that we can post them out for later viewing at a later time if you want to as well. And I've got another question. So,
talk about when pushing out wireless networks to Chromebooks with multiple SSIDs in one location, cause the Chromebook to jump back and forth between the SSIDs.
Okay. So the question is they've got multiple SSIDs at a location, and this is where the question is, they've got multiple SSIDs. Will it cause the users to jump from one SSID to another? So what you're going to want to do is, based upon the user, you're going to want to give them only one SSID to jump to. The reason that we have 3 SSIDs here is because we have the one that's MCNC, that's here at the office. Somebody has a home network that's called home, evidently, that they were testing. And then we have our EAP one that's an EAP SSID. Not sure where that one's at. But push one SSID to your user. So if I wanted to go down and I wanted to say John Test, I would, if my users were in that for the high school, I would actually remove these others and only have them join the MCNC SSID. The less of a chance of them hopping from one to the other, the better off you are. Any other questions, Tim? I know we ran over just a few minutes.
Can you show the sign-in sheet URL?
Yes, the sign-in sheet URL. If you attended today's webinar, if you could please sign in on the goo.gl. That will help us to get you guys information on today's presentation, as well the video feed that you can watch this at a later time. As well, if you need CEU credits, we can go through and send you the CEU credits. Please take a few minutes to register for today's event. As well, if you're planning to attend later on Google Apps user management, we'll be discussing Google Apps Directory Sync, Google Apps Password Sync, as well as the command line Google Apps Manager tool. Thank you for attending, and look forward to seeing you soon.